I forgot about Titus in the last video. Sorry, Titus. Titus was Paul's representative in Corinth. This was Paul's letter to Titus about his new church in Crete. It should be lumped in with 1st and 2nd Timothy because it is in fact a pastoral letter. How to be a pastor. It's very practical. It's short. It's practical. It's focused on church ministry, discipleship, how to teach people, how for them to grow, how for them to learn, how for them to be closer to Christ. The answer to that, of course, according to the book of Titus, is sound doctrine, good behavior, and holy living. You know, we have an idea that that's probably what we want in a good pastor. Okay, speaking of pastors, now we get to Hebrews. So essentially the theme of Hebrews is Christ is the great high priest. Now, this is to a Jewish audience, most assumingly a Jewish Christian audience. So they have an idea of what a priest is. They know what a great high priest, like the highest priest, would be. And we, even in our culture, know what a really good pastor, like the greatest pastor or the greatest priest. We know what that person would look like. We know what kind of the characteristics we would be looking for. So the theme here is Christ is the great high priest. It's mostly attributed to Paul. Everyone assumes it. In the past, it was very assumed it was Paul. Now, there's kind of some question about whether Paul actually did write Hebrews because there's some things in there that he would have potentially not been around for. Maybe he started it, someone else finished it, but we can assume it's Paul if that helps you. Again, unknown audience. This is not like, hi, this is Paul writing to these specific people. This is it's unknown. Many attribute it to Paul, and it's not clear who it is written to. So this is a pretty common problem during times of doubt, despair, something terrible has happened. It's finals week. It's the last week of school. Your college shuts down. Someone dies, someone gets sick. We all go through these times of doubt and just despair and wonder, what are we even Christians? Can we lose our faith? So these people are brand new Christians. Christianity is a new thing altogether. And they're like, okay, what happens when I doubt? What happens when I don't want to pray? What happens when I don't feel good about being a Christian? What does that mean? So Hebrews states it calls for us to endure in faith, to hold fast to Jesus, who is our high priest. So yes, go to your local pastor, but also know that there's a pastor so much greater than your pastor, which is Jesus, which is the greatest high priest. That person, pray to that person, and that is how you endure these kind of hardships. And one of the things that's pointed out here is one of the reasons that makes Jesus a great high priest is that he has endured suffering. So the story of Jesus says he came to earth. He endured death on a cross. He endured being beaten. He has also suffered. So this is not like Zeus or some god who lives completely apart who has never suffered. We have maybe all known these people or these priests who have never suffered, right? They're like, oh, this is how you should live. But you can tell, they just haven't, they're hard to relate to. Right? The book of Hebrews is like, no, I know you're suffering, but know that Christ also suffered, and that's why he understands you, and that's why he's the perfect priest. When you start to fall into doubt and despair, which we all do. Some of them just are like, I give up, I just want to return to Jewish customs. This is too hard, I don't understand it, there's new rules, I don't like it, I just want to go back to being Jewish. So this is, again, hold fast to Christianity, hold fast to this love and grace and to your great high priest, which is Christ. And so it again, in this theme of Jesus as the great high priest, compares Jesus to Moses, saying Moses was great, but Christ is so much better. So if you want to go back to being Jewish, you only have Moses to look up to. But if you're a Christian, you have Jesus. Adds in there that Jesus is higher than angels, that even angels answer to the great high priest, which is Jesus. He is in the order of Melchizedek. You will hear this reference occasionally. This comes from Genesis 14, where Abraham actually pays a tithe to the order of Melchizedek. He is a priest of God. The name means king of the righteous. Also, Psalm 110 refers to priests like Melchizedek. Melchizedek. I've heard it say, I usually say Melchizedek. Jesus is the priest of the new covenant. There's no reason to go back to the old covenant where we just had Moses. This is the new covenant. Now you don't have to go through a priest to talk to God. Your priest is Jesus. So you can go directly to Jesus. You can go directly to God. Jesus is the only high priest, and you can speak to him directly. Direct line of communication. Since Jesus is the ultimate priest, we can have this confidence to enter into the holy place, right? Remember the Old Testament and the temple, and there's like the series of holier and holier places that you can go depending on how Jewish you are. Well, this is like, you can go directly to the center of the temple and talk to Jesus. You don't have to do any of the other things. You have direct access to the holy place through Jesus. We all should approach Jesus with a clear conscience and a heart full of faith. And you should find support in meeting together. You don't have to do the Jewish customs. You don't need to ostracize anyone that you feel like is more or less pure than others. Like, we're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that. Okay, Hebrews, the end of the book is a long list of practical things, which are just very practical, that we're like, yeah, of course, like be moral, try and be hospitable when people come to your house, be in prayer, praise God, be truthful. These are all things. That is the book of Hebrew. Let's talk about James. James is honestly my favorite book of the Bible. I know that's weird, but I just really love it. So here's the thing about James. Let's talk about James. James was Jesus's brother, right? So like when he was alive, James is like, yeah, you're the son of God. Whatever, sure you are, right? I'm going to give you a wedgie, right? I'm going to slap you in the face, right? This man was Jesus's brother. He was raised with Jesus as a little kid, right? He knew Jesus as a child. So James was not an original disciple because he was Jesus's brother. Towards the end of his ministry, you see James being involved. And then definitely after the ascension, James was there when he rose, met with the disciples and James. And James is like, oh, dude, you are actually the Son of God. Can you just, anybody that has siblings, think about that for a second? Like, oh my gosh, what? You've been telling me this, and I thought you were just being a pain. But you really are the Son of God. That's crazy. So James, of course, has all of these things that he knows about Jesus. So he writes a book himself, and just warns people of more practical things. You would think that the book would have a lot of like cute little anecdotes about Jesus, but it's not. It's short, pithy sentences, much like Psalms, much like the wisdom books. It just has like short sentences. I'll show you some examples. Warns of wealth, encourages sympathy for the poor. This was not only Jesus' brother, but a pillar of the early church and a witness to the resurrected Christ. So he may not have been a disciple, but he's definitely one of the people that was closest to Jesus. Writes to the 12 tribes, or the Jewish Christians. So it's written to Jews. He quotes Jesus, but a lot of his quotes are also found in other books. So he doesn't have a lot of, again, you would think it would be like all these like insights into Jesus as a child, but he doesn't actually do that. He uses aphorisms. These are things like that are in Psalms. These are observations that contain a general truth. Like, this sounds like a psalm, right? An indecisive man is unstable in all his ways. Man's anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. There's all of these sort of really pithy, really like strong sentences, and that's James' style of writing. Uses pictorial language, uses pictures, images. For a doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. Consider ships. Though very large, they are guided by a small rudder where the will of the pillar directs. Right? This is his style of writing. He encouraged those that were being persecuted. Trials produce endurance and faith. He talks a lot about. So if you're depressed ever, I highly recommend the book of James. James encourages Christians to do good work. James feels good works actually help you get through the side effect of persecution. And it should be a natural effect of being a Christian. If you're not being persecuted, maybe you're not a good enough Christian. I don't know that that's true in America, but it is true in a lot of other places. And it just, being a good person should be a side effect.